let's take a look at the fallen star of the Blood Angels, who just happens to be the last named character that we have yet to review. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. We've been going over the Blood Angels Codex and all of their unique options over the last month or so, and we've covered most of the unique options they have to offer. In today's video we'll be taking a look at Captain Tycho, and also his Tycho the Lost datasheet, representing him when he succumbed to the Black Rage. In this video we'll be taking a look at the datasheet's rules themselves, any obvious synergies or buffs on the tabletop, and how I would use him myself in a game of 40k. In the background, Captain Tycho was known as the Master of Sacrifice, the captain of the Blood Angels 3rd Company. He won great distinction in the Second War of Armageddon, where he and his company were instrumental in repelling the Greenskins. Unfortunately, during this action, he was maimed in a horrible psychic attack from an orc weird boy, leaving the right side of his face in a permanent rictus grin, and this is why he always wore a mask over the right side of his face. Commander Dante was originally planning for him to succeed him as chapter master, but Tycho's temperament became ever more volatile as he slowly descended into the Black Rage. Tycho finally met his end back on Armageddon for the 3rd War of Armageddon, when Ghazghkul's forces assailed the Hive World afresh. Tycho led the Death Company in a brutal assault through the breach in the Hive city of Tempestora, their noble sacrifice carrying the day against the Greenskins. When his body was later recovered and his mask was removed, there was no trace of his previous disfigurement on his face. It seems that his valorous death had given him some measure of peace before the end. A very compelling story for the Blood Angels, forever cursed to be fallen heroes. Though Tycho has now fallen, you can still use his datasheets in games of 40k to represent any of the battles he may have fought in. He has 2 datasheets, Captain Tycho and Tycho the Lost, the first being when he was a captain, and second after he'd fallen into the Death Company. So let's take a look at his rules. So Captain Tycho will cost you 85 points, and is an HQ choice for Codex Blood Angels. He's got a movement of 6, weapon skill and ballistic skill of 2 up, strength and toughness 4, 5 wounds, 4 attacks, leadership 9 and a 2 up save. So essentially basically the stat line of a normal captain with a 2 up save. He has a Iron Halo as a standard for the captains, so he's very hard to shift indeed, and he's armed with Blood Song, his relic combi melter, bolt pistol and frag and crack grenades. It does stipulate that you can only include 1 Tycho model in your army, so obviously no having him and Death Company Tycho as well. Blood Song is a combi melter, which essentially has a mastercrafted rules for the bolt gun part of it. So the bolt gun is rapid fire 1, strength 4, AP -1 and damage 2. So it's quite a destructive little weapon when you're firing both parts of it, which you can do at the expense of -1 to hit on both parts. It is a bit unfortunate that he doesn't have any sort of fancy close combat gear, meaning he'll just have the 5 close combat weapon attacks on the charge with shock assault. This is still not too bad seeing as he is Blood Angels, but it means it's only ever going to be any good at dealing with light infantry. Anything with decent armor saves is not going to suffer any significant damage from Tycho in close combat. He has the usual Angels of Death special rule for shock assault as we mentioned, and extra AP on Blood Song when he's in the tactical doctrine, and bolter discipline if he should choose to stand still for the mastercrafted part of it. He has the standard Captain Rites of Battle rule for reroll 1s within 6 inches of him, and he has 1 additional special rule called Abhor the Beast, where he can make an extra D3 attacks if he is within 1 inches of any orc models. He will actually put a decent dent in orc mobs, as they don't have high armor saves, and he'll typically be hitting with 7 attacks in the first round of close combat. If it were me, I'd look at Captain Tycho as a interesting upgrade on a regular Space Marine captain. He costs 11 points over the base captain armed with a bolt gun. For that you get his relic combi melter, a 2 up save, and the special rule for extra attacks against orcs, but you do lose the option of taking any close combat gear, which is quite significant in a Blood Angels army. Moving on now, we have Tycho the Lost. He has exactly the same stat line as the regular Tycho, and exactly the same armament. I believe that you just represent it with the same model but paint him black. Tycho the Lost will cost you 70 points, so he's a fair bit cheaper, but he swaps out his Rites of Battle rule for the Death Company keyword and the Black Rage. Now losing Rites of Battle for commanding his fellow Blood Angels and improving his own attacks is a bit of a blow, Black Rage will give him a 6-up Feel No Pain, so he'll be a bit more survivable, and he'll get 1 extra attack when he charges into close combat, but unfortunately, as we discussed, that's only going to be another regular chainsword style attack, so not exceptionally valuable. So Tycho the Lost really only has the advantages of his close combat and shooting abilities, so you're going to have to get the most out of that to make him effective on the battlefield. Tycho's Warlord trait, should you choose to give him one, will allow him to heroically intervene 6 inches rather than 3. I'd personally not really bother with this one, it's not the most valuable of the Blood Angel's traits, and it won't come up all that often. If you absolutely do need him to heroically intervene 6 inches though, you could always potentially use the Unbridled Ardour stratagem to get him to do that anyway. I'd personally make your Warlord someone else, unless you literally just want to keep this guy back somewhere safe, buffing some shooting units, to make sure your opponent doesn't get Slay the Warlord. As per normal for Blood Angels, there are a million characters who can decently buff his damage. We'll actually be covering them shortly in a video or two's time, and comparing all the various assault buffs that we can get in the Blood Angels army, so feel free to check back for that in a few days. Death Company Tycho in particular can make use of pretty much most of these, so captains, lieutenants, sanguinary priests, the sanguinor will all buff his melee and sometimes ranged damage output. Death Company Tycho can also have some reasonable synergy with Lamates, who can give him reroll charges and reroll hits. Sanguinary priests being about also isn't such a bad shout if you're running some fighty characters, as they can heal them. In terms of stratagems, I wouldn't go too crazy on running stratagems on this guy. He's quite a cheap character without too much fancy close combat gear, so doesn't make the most efficient use out of command points. That being said, Red Rampage is always an option for getting a few extra attacks out of a charge. It could put him up to 9 attacks against orcs when he charges, for example. And only in death does duty end could be a potential option for firing off that combi melter one last time, if there's something nearby that you could potentially kill in one shot. As a walking Blood Angels character, he synergizes quite well with drop pods to be able to deliver him right to the front lines in combi melter range, perhaps alongside a squad for Captain Tycho to buff, before the whole lot of them just plough into the enemy. This might work okay with a drop pod full of Death Company, or Vanguard veterans, or Company veterans with Stormbolters perhaps. So how would I actually run Tycho in game? Out of the 2 options, I'd probably go for the Captain Tycho as opposed to the Death Company Tycho, because having those reroll ones to hit both in shooting and assault for both himself and any units near him is a massive value add compared with just using his melee and shooting profile, which, while not bad, is a little bit underwhelming compared with some of the other very scary options the Blood Angels have to play with. Despite his fancy war gear, I'd usually treat him as pretty much a basic buff captain that just has a few additional bonuses like decent shooting and that 2-up save for if danger threatens. You could potentially keep him alongside a battle line as a minimal investment over a standard captain, or potentially, as I said before, put him in a drop pod alongside some fighty infantry who he can buff both in shooting and in melee with the reroll ones, and add to the firepower with that nice combi melter. Death Company Tycho is going to have to actually get close to the enemy to have any effect on the battle at all, so again he might synergize well with a drop pod to at least guarantee him one shot with that multi-melter that the enemy can't escape from. I'm afraid personally I do think that Tycho the Lost for 70 points isn't particularly efficient in terms of damage output compared with a lot of the other Blood Angels options. His close combat isn't awful, but it's limited to being good against light infantry, and not every army has them. And Bloodsong isn't bad, but again it's not the most efficient shooting when it's on a 70 point character, considering you could get a full squad with a heavy weapon for pretty much the same points. I personally think that Death Company Tycho is a bit more of a fun and fluff option as opposed to competitive. The main competitor for Captain Tycho himself is the regular Space Marine Captain, mainly because they have a lot more flexibility in their loadout. Being able to take a jump pack or bike is great, as is having the option for actual close combat gear such as power swords, fists, thunder hammers, you name it. Blood Angels characters are exceptionally fighty with minimal investment, and it's really annoying not to be able to take that minimal investment to turn him from a sort of okay combat character into a really good one. That being said, just 11 points over the standard captain for a 2-up save and a combi melter isn't the worst deal at all if you're mainly using his aura to buff units, so I think that he does have a niche and could be good for filling out a cheap battalion. Let me know your thoughts on Tycho down below in the comments. He's not exactly the most competitive model, but he's certainly a fun and flavourful character model with a cool backstory that won't hinder your Blood Angels too much by bringing him along. As always, thanks for listening to another Auspex Tactics video. We'll be finishing up the Blood Angels reviews over the next few days, so if you have any other ideas for future videos concerning the Sons of Sanguinius, please let me know as well. Feel free to support my Patreon if you're finding my videos useful to you and you'd like to support the channel. Thanks again, I'll hope to see you guys next time.